Meeting on YouTube, and a recording of the meeting will also be available afterwards. We're not expecting a fire alarm test today, and if the alarm does sound, please follow the officers out of the building and gather in the cathedral grounds. The main purpose of today's meeting is to look at the challenges and key issues for social care and children's services as a result of local government reorganisation. We're going to do that in two parts. We're having first presentation on the adult services. We'll then have a short break and then go to children's services. And I'm delighted to welcome Councillor John Spence, the Cabinet Member for Adult and Children's Services, supported by Nick Presmake, the Executive Director ASC, and Helen Lincoln, Executive Director for Children, Families and Education. Supported also by Peter Fairley, Claire Hardy and Moira McGrath. You're most welcome to our meeting today. So I'll start with item 1, membership apologies, substitutions and declarations of interest. As far as apologies are concerned, we have apologies from Councillors Playle, Reid, May, McCrory. Mike McCrory is attending the funeral of the late Councillor Ian Dale, and June Lumley. June is substituted by Councillor Jeff Henry. Online we have Reverend Alan Moss. I don't know that we have anyone else online. Am I correct on that? No one else online. No one else online. Okay. Are there any declarations of interest that anyone has? No? Thank you. Item 2, minutes of the previous meeting held on Thursday the 11th of September. They have been circulated. Those colleagues that were present, are you happy that they are a true record and that I sign them as such? Agreed. Thank you. Right. Question time. There are no members of the public present in the chamber, and there are no public questions. So we will go on to the main item, item 4, the perceived challenges and key issues relating to local government reorganisation. And as I say, we are going to start first with the adult social care. John, I'll hand over to you first to introduce it, and then your team to do the presentation, and we will then ask a number of questions. I think probably at the end of the presentation rather than as we're going along, if you feel that would be better. I think otherwise we can go off in various directions, so we'll do it that way. So I'll hand over to you, Councillor Spence.
Chairman, thank you. Good morning, members, and for anyone listening online, John Spence, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Adult Social Care, Public Health and NHS Integration. It's very good to be here, Chairman. I must confess that when I came to sit and my chair was broken, it pretty well summed up the morning so far, actually, but there we are. We're very grateful for the chance to help you understand and to get advice from you as we proceed over this pathway over the next 18, 24, 30 months, whichever definition you use. What I hope we can bring out to you is the complexity of the task itself and the complexity of the circumstances in which we are doing this. And the Chair has agreed that I'll just say very briefly about adult social care and say something else on children's services later. As far as adult social care is concerned, we are operating in a new NHS system as we have integrated care boards 3, becoming 1, and that's only operational April next year, and there's a huge amount of upheaval to go on between now and then. And that efficacy of the whole system working between local government and the NHS is brought out very clearly in the NHS 10-year plan. I did, Chairman, circulate a briefing for all councillors last night. Secondly, our own systems are in change. We were long, before local government reorganisation came up, we are long committed to move to a new social care performance platform, and I briefed this morning on how that is proceeding, which is on schedule and fine. It is another complexity. And those IT system complexities, when we understand that the other two unitary councils, Southend and Thurrock, have their own systems, is a further complexity. This in the context of changing government legislation, more relevant in children's services when we come to that, but still here. The CQC expectations, and a demand profile which is changing in volume and complexity as we had expected with the demographics of the county. So this is a turbulent world. This is not setting out across a calm sea to get to our goal. We are going to have to undertake both the programme on adult social care and on children's services with many cross currents coming into play. And it's going to need a great deal of resilience by our officers, a great deal of coherence to the task, but doing this alongside the certainty that we must continue to deliver the quality of service for all our residents. And as the leader of the council has said, and both the executive directors have said to me, ensuring that not one single person falls through the cracks. I think that's more than enough from me. I'll hand you over to Nick Presnick.
Thank you, John. Nick.
Thank you very much, Chair. John has covered all the main points as ever, and today I'm just going to pass the relay button so that Claire can do the presentation, and that way I think we'll manage the time better.
Okay, thank you. Claire.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Claire Hardy. I'm Head of Strategy and Service Improvement within Adult Social Care. So I'll just take us through the presentation. So we're focusing first of all on adult social care. We're in our preparation phase for local government reorganisation. So our focus at the moment is on understanding the challenges of what needs to be done, exploring approaches so that we can ensure there is a smooth transition and that the new unitary authorities are safe and legal on that day one. We're learning from other local authorities who have already been through this. And I should say that our work is agnostic to any models or configurations. This is simply about the steps we're going to need to go through. So it's not a debate about which model is better. This is an agnostic approach. Inevitably, our approach will need to be flexible and it will need to evolve as we work with partners and understand what configuration is likely to be. If you could move on to the next slide, please. So this is just a reminder of the national timelines that we're working to here. All of the proposals have been submitted. There was 4 that were submitted. It's now with the government to review those before deciding on what goes into the statutory consultation. We anticipate hearing back from that in March of next year as to which is likely to be the configuration to be implemented. And then it will go through the sort of formal legislative process around the structural change order with the elections on the 6th of May in 27 to the new unitary authorities. And then we've got that sort of just under a year of a transition period before we go live of vesting day. So just to root us in the time frame we're dealing with. The next slide, please. So our starting point obviously needs to be our legislative framework. So the Care Act is our key piece of legislation here. We need to use this to ensure that point about safe and legal. So this is about adult social care. This is a provision of services to adults who are over 18, who may need help due to a physical or learning disability, mental health or age-related conditions. Our aim is always to ensure that individuals live as independently as possible whilst remaining their dignity and quality of life. And a whole concept that is underpinned through the Care Act is around prevent, reduce, delay. So we're always looking at where we can prevent, reduce or delay the need for care and support, enabling people to be as independent as possible. We meet people's needs through a range of different solutions. So that might be personal care and nutrition, keeping their home safe and clean, maintaining family or personal relationships, enabling people to participate in work, education or volunteering, using community services and public transport, being able to get out and about. And we also provide support to carers to enable them to care. Our objectives are always around promoting independence, enhancing wellbeing, providing safety and security, and the support for carers. If we could go on to the next slide, please. This is something we developed for our recent CQC question and was around an articulation of the customer journey. And we always think it's helpful to keep grounded in this approach. So many people will access our services through our front door, Social Care Connects, and there they will be triaged or signposted either into early help and prevention services, or they may well go on to a full assessment. And that's sort of detailed in the navy blue box. Others will come to us, around 45% will come to us from a hospital discharge or from a hospital setting. Again, there we will be assessing them initially for some short-term support. Essex has a really comprehensive reablement and short-term support offer. So we're really looking to enable that independence, giving people some intensive support to enable them to sort of get back on their feet before we decide whether or not we need to do a full assessment for any ongoing support. Those that do go on to need a full assessment and ongoing support will also be subject to a financial assessment. Adult social care is means tested, and we can support those that are self-funders. We always undertake that financial assessment to see where people might need to contribute to their care. But as I said, we can continue to support people who are self-funders as well. As I've already said, our main aim is to keep people as independent and as possible. And one of the reasons for this is that admission into residential care is a key cost of driver of our costs. It's also not where people want to be. So it's always key for us to really focus on that early help and prevent and that short-term support. Throughout the change, all of this change, it's really important that we keep sighted on this whole customer journey. As Councillor Spence mentioned, we don't want anyone to get lost in this change. We don't want anyone to get missed and so on. We really want to make sure that we keep sight of the customer journey to make sure that people have that good experience throughout. But also that focus on early help and prevention also really helps us to manage demand and the costs associated with that. Over the past 5 years, adult social care has seen a 16% increase in referrals through to our front door and then onto our assessment team. However, this is only translated to a 3% rise in service provision. That shows the success of our early help and our short-term support. And if we lose track of that, then obviously we lose track of demand and costs within all of this change. So we really want to make sure we keep a focus on our customer journey. If you go on to the next slide, please. So I'm just going to set out some of the areas and the considerations we're exploring in this sort of preparing and planning phase. We're going to look at the sort of financial, service delivery and workforce implications, commercial and market management, and strategy and governance. So starting with the financial considerations, the first bit that will absolutely be key is around understanding those populations of the new unitary authorities. Demography and deprivation are key drivers of demand for us. So we really need to look and understand how the populations will fall once we know what the configuration of the new unitary authorities are. Understand the tax base, the number of self-funders, the wealth and age and the distribution of needs in those areas, because that's going to be a change for us and will not only impact about the sort of demand for the service, but also impacts things like the market. The number of self-funders we have has an interplay with the shape of the market. There are obviously opportunities with all of this change, and there'll be efficiencies that will hopefully come from looking at how we can work more closely together, particularly for adult social care around housing, prevention, early help, and all of that community capacity. So we're going to need to work closely together to make sure that we can capture those efficiencies and reinvest them back into the system. There will, of course, be transition costs as well, so we'll need to make sure that we understand them and how we manage those throughout. Councillor Spence mentioned our social care case management platform programme, so we've got a new system coming in there. We know from other areas already that the changeover of the case management system, which underpins all of our work, is so key and really tricky during that transition. So there's going to need to be a fair chunk of work around that. There is also some challenges around legacy costs and debt. As I've already covered, adult social care is a financially assessed service. So we do carry debt from service users in a number of ways. Adults who use our services can also apply for a deferred payment agreement. So some people, if they go into residential care, will have the cost of their house that can be taken into account. They may not wish to sell the house at that moment, so they can have a deferred payment agreement that's set against that. That's all part of the process, and that's something that we manage. So we'll need to explore how that works in these transitions and those agreements. Also linked to this, there's a key concept within adult social care of ordinary residence. This is a legal position which determines which local authority is responsible for the cost of care if someone is placed out of area. At the moment, obviously, we can place within the whole of Essex and that doesn't come into play. The moment we start to create additional borders, we need to think about what does that mean. The legal advice we've had so far is that ordinary residence is about the way is an agreement between existing local authorities, and given that Essex County Council will no longer exist, it doesn't apply. However, in some areas they have chosen to cost care back between local authorities, but that would be an agreement for partners to make in due course. But obviously it's going to be quite complicated for us to understand where people originated from compared to where they're based and so on, if that's the route that the system agrees to go down. So there's quite a lot in that area that we'll need to unpick. We also need to be mindful of budget allocations. We can obviously look where demand is rising, where our workforce is based, but the allocation of budget to the new unitary authorities will come through a different source. And obviously the government is currently consulting around the way that budgets are allocated to local authorities. So we can see changes there, and we may end up with a mismatch almost between the budget allocated and maybe demand, or the way that we've allocated the workforce. So we're going to need to keep on top of that. Moving on to service delivery and workforce considerations. Obviously, we want to maintain the service offer and the quality. We want to make sure that people experience at least the same or an improved service throughout all of this change. There are differences between the existing upper tier authorities, just slight variations between the offers that exist between Southend, Essex and Thurrock. So we need to work through what that might mean. We obviously don't want people to experience a loss of service. For instance, Essex has a very comprehensive care tech offer. Thurrock has a very comprehensive communities offer. There might be changes that would mean that people who might merge into a certain could end up losing a care tech. We want to try and make sure that that's not the case. Operating structures will need working through. So we need to align new leadership to those organisations and think through the practice models, workforce policies, terms and conditions. And we also have many county-wide functions within adult social care. It's around 50% of our workforce are in our localities and 50% are in county-wide functions. That includes a number of specialist teams, operational safeguarding, service and placement teams. We need to think about how those may move over once we know the configuration. Some may well work, others may not. We need to think about that. And of course, there are opportunities as well for maintaining things across the new organisations if all the partners agree. But we'll need to work through for about 50% of our workforce what that might mean in terms of a change from a county-wide approach. I've already mentioned the importance of demand management and early help. We need to make sure that we don't lose sight of that through this change. If we lose sight of some of our early help services, then the demand will just increase, and that has significant consequences for our budget. We need to obviously think about our workforce strategy and availability. How do we make sure that we maintain the workforce during this change? We don't want to lose morale and people find it difficult to leave. There is a lot of competition for the social care workforce. And we also want to avoid in the new configuration that we don't have inter-authority competition between the social work authorities, so that everyone wants to go and work in one and not the others. Linked to that, we have ESCA, the Essex Social Care Academy, that provides all the training. Southend also have a training body itself, so I'm going to need to think through what's the future for that. Will that work on a different configuration? Are there opportunities to keep some of that county-wide? There are also a different mix of in-house services within Essex. We currently have 4 learning disability residential homes that are still in-house, and we also have ECL as an arm's length provider. So we need to think about what is the future for those. Southend, I think, also has some an in-house service, and Thurrock has some in-house residential bits, but different configurations that will all need to be worked through. And then service integration. We want to make sure that we look at the opportunities for working across the new opportunities, so housing, planning, social care, education, how we can join all of these up for improved coordination and delivery of services. This is about public sector reform, so we want to make sure that we don't miss those opportunities and things continue to look the same. We want to explore the potential here. If we could move on to commercial and market management considerations. I've already touched a bit on market capacity, but there isn't an even footprint of provision across Essex. We have some specialist services that will only exist in one area, but also for a number of historic reasons, 46% of all our residential care providers are located in just Tendring and Colchester. So each of the new authorities are not necessarily going to have sufficient provision, and we need to look at that spread across the market. We know that the market is in quite a challenged position. We've had the cost of care and increasing costs from national insurance. So we want to make sure that we don't have perverse competition between market shaping strategies of the new organisation, and that we continue to support the market as a whole. There is also a lot of work we need to do around our contract harmonisation and the management of our contracts, which Moira is leading on. So we need to look at existing contracts. Some of them may, and partnerships as well. Some of them may need to be renegotiated or terminated. It's that bit about harmonisation as well. How do we ensure that residents receive a consistent offer across their area? We also are very mindful that the new organisations, we don't want to tie them up in really long-term contracts, but we also don't want everything to stop on day one and not be safe and legal. So it's trying to strike that balance between giving some coverage for the first few years, but also not having everything change at the same time. So they've got that opportunity to be functioning in the first place, but not committed to long-term, so they can change things. We also have a number of economies of scale and things that we work on jointly. So currently we offer an out-of-hours service to Southend. We have joint arrangements across Essex, Southend and Thurrock around some mental health and the health inequalities programme. So we need to explore what is the future for some of those arrangements as well. And then on to the next slide, which is around strategy and governance considerations. Obviously, we have a number of existing policies and strategies. Again, we need to think about balance here. Do these all just transfer? The new organisations will want to set their own direction, but how do you ensure they've got some coverage for that first period? What's the right balance there? We've got a number of key strategic boards, such as the Health and Wellbeing Board and the Safeguarding Adults Board, similarly for Children's. Their future of those are going to need to be thought about. They'll need to change along to the new configuration as well. We've got the mayoral and combined authority powers that are coming on board. There's a responsibility in there around prevention and early help, but we don't know what that's going to look like. So we need to explore as we develop this what the mayor and their new responsibilities will look like. And again, as Councillor Spence mentioned, we've had a significant change about to happen in the health system with a new integrated care board for Essex. So we've been long arguing for an integrated care board for the whole of Greater Essex. So that is now coming on board. We need to make sure that whilst those changes are then happening and then are changes, that we maintain those working relationships, the joint commissioning, the integrated teams, and that we keep a focus on the customer experience. So I'm just going to touch now on some of the key risks. So we're developing our risk register around this. There are risks around the transition, and there are risks around the design for the approach, the new approach, which could be mitigated through the design. So there's key risks around sustainability. I've already mentioned that the government funding may not align with currently how we spend or demand or how we allocate resources. There may be increased costs as a result of reduced economies of scale. We need to maintain the services, so we need to make sure that we don't destabilise services during the transition and not be compliant, but also have any single individual lost or missed in the process. Our workforce will be key. We want to make sure that they're supported through the change, that we focus on staff wellbeing and recruitment and retention, and that partnership point that I've just covered, how we maintain those partnership arrangements through what will be a number of years of change. And then finally, resourcing for the implementation. Obviously, this is just a high level of risks. There's many layers of risks that we're coordinating. So if you could move on to the next slide. So we're currently in this phase one. The business cases or proposals are being submitted. Between October and March, we're working on the preparations. So we're continuing to explore these issues and considerations. Work has started on many of the contract bits because there's a long lead-in time on a number of those. We're making sure we're going to collect all the data we need to enable us to do the design. We obviously need to work with other authorities and Southend and Thurrock in particular, and we're exploring exploring arrangements with them. And through our approach, we're going to need to be agile to respond to partners and the configurations once we know. And then my final slide just sets up what we're starting as around a sort of a bit of a way of organising our thinking. As I said, this will need to be flexible and adjust to partnership arrangements. But we've got an overarching programme for adult social care that's starting to think about what is it we're going to need to do in due course with partners and those new configurations around the vision, mission and outcomes for the new organisation, getting into a full design approach, very much rooted in what the practice model is. And then we've got work streams with each one of our directors aligned to there to look at the workforce, what that means for pay and conditions, the development and support for the workforce, information and data, the case management system, but also all of our performance data, how that works. The market shaping and contracts, as I said, Moira's already started looking at that. That will pick up our contracts, the joint commissioning arrangements, and sort of the future of Essex Cares. We've then got partnership arrangements. So we have what's called a Section 75 agreement with our mental health trust, what happens with that, but a wider range of partnership frameworks and strategies that would all need to be thought through. Our financial assessments, there's work there around how that process is all supported, what happens with the income and the debt. I didn't mention earlier, but the Better Care Fund is a key grant we get that comes in across the whole of Essex and then needs to be disaggregated. We are underpinning this all with comms and engagement, not only for our workforce, but also with our partners and providers to keep them informed throughout. And then we've got a governance work stream, which will look to the shadow arrangements in due course, but also an assurance around how we make sure we are also fit and legal during this transition, that we can keep the ship running here and ensure that safe transition over. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. It's a very good presentation, and I think gives us an excellent start point for questions. I'm going to open it up now. Who would like to start? Carla? Yes?
Yes, thank you. Claire, thank you very much. Very clear presentation, and I say there's quite a lot of focus on all the areas that obviously of concern. My main area of concern is something that John has always spoken quite publicly about, is the disparity between North and South. And that's something you have covered, and the budget allocation inter-authority agreement. Who will police the agreement, and what if agreement is not reached? I mean, it's a fact that the South at the moment subsidises the services in the North, and I wasn't aware that 46% of the care providers are in Colchester and Tendring. I knew it was about 30%, but I wasn't aware that's 46%. So what plans are there in place to expand that? He did say that it would be, you're looking at it and you're aware of it, but those two areas at the moment.
Through you, Chair, thank you, Carla, and I'll bring Nick in. I think it's probably fairer to say the rest of Essex subsidises the North East in a way, because that's what we've got. We've got a very significant range in the levels of demand and in the tax bases, and that's what we always knew. Claire said our plans will need to be agnostic to the geographic configuration. So whatever happens, we will do our best to make this work. What I would very much, one could speculate that our job is to ensure a very good quality service is smoothly transitioned into whatever that follows. If it is the decision that we have the smaller geographic units, then the challenges get greater. And that's what I said at the full council meeting when we discussed this. The larger the number of units, the of unitaries, the smaller the number, the smaller they are, the less financially and operationally sustainable they are, and that is a real risk. But I'll pass over to Nick.
Thank you, Councillor Spence. Just a couple of observations. So some of this is just structural, and it will not change. Will not change rapidly, such as where the mental health hospitals are, where the learning disabilities hospitals were. They will always lead to disparity. Another way of looking at it is that North East Essex subsidises the rest of Essex because it offers cheaper services at value for money. So you could look at it both ways, couldn't you?
Clever way to.
Because that's why we place people there. So I think we have to remember why we have often used services, because that's where housing is, that's where residential care was, and it's good value. And actually, one of the interesting price comparators is between Tendring and Southend. I find they're quite similar. So that's another way of looking at it. You asked how will agreements be policed? Well, the obvious answer, I'm afraid, Carlo, is that will be the job of the new authorities. I would suggest it is a different question, though, which is if you're sitting in Authority A and you don't have to pay Authority B by law £2 million a year for historic provision, what would motivate you to do that as a councillor? And Murray and I have seen these agreements in the NHS, and for all the goodwill in the world, you have to fund your own budget, you have to meet your own political priorities. So on what basis would there be a 3, 4, 5 authority agreement around something like ordinary residents? It could mean, I don't know, an authority in mid-Essex agreeing to transfer £3 or £4 million of its council tax to the rest of Essex over a 10-year period. You only need one council to default and the whole thing will unroll.
Absolutely. Can I say
Yes,
something?
by all means.
On that note, Colchester and Tendring have always had, on the local plans, policies to make special provisions for care services. And I just wonder if there's a role here for the county council to ensure that we've still got another couple of years to go as plans come up for renewal. Are those policies, we ensure that those policies are included in everyone else's plans as well as historically like we've done in Colchester and Tendring.
Yeah, so we've been doing a lot of work with the district, borough and city councils to support where local plans are coming up. We've done a really significant piece of demand projection work, which is taking us, I think, over a 20-year period, that's just been published, which was as a result of conversations with the district, borough and city councils. So that's been very clear about what we see the demand for all types of bedded provision, including children's as well as adults. We're framing that to give information to the council so they can use that as part of their local plan process. One of our learnings was we were giving information and it wasn't helpful because it wasn't in a form they could use in the local plan. So we've learned from that. We've also got design guides for supported accommodation we've developed with the sustainable growth team in the council. So that's all available. So now when we're doing responses to planning applications, we have a lot of material that is actually structured and helpful to the planning process, as well as what's going into local plans. That's the result of really strong collaboration we've got under the current arrangements and the issues that the district, borough and city councils have raised with us about that disconnect that we had, where we thought we were giving the right information and it wasn't in a form they could accept. And that means that, so we respond to individual planning applications and in the areas of saturation that Nick has described, we are saying really clearly to councils now, we don't think there's a strong need for a care home in the area, but we do know what we need in terms of supported accommodation. And the other point is the adaptability of properties is an issue. So the new towns, there's very little property that's adaptable for the needs of social care. In places, particularly in the coastal communities where we've got old B&B type provision, often they're much more adaptable. So some of it is a function of the way that estate kind of operates across the different parts of Essex. So what is available, sometimes we have to be pragmatic about what's actually available. But we've learned a huge amount in the last couple of years. And we're in a much better place, and we've had really positive feedback from the district, borough and city councils about how we're working with them now. And I chair a group quarterly where we, with the district, borough and city councils, where we work through a lot of these issues. But yeah, so I think actually that puts us on a really good footing for what's going forward.
Chairman, thank you. Very good to hear
Councillor
that.
Susan Barker.
Chairman, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to the pre-meeting, so I'm not sticking to your script here. You talk about staff and staff wanting to stay in one area, not another area. I'm more worried about senior staff and senior management. There are some councillors here who, when we go unitary, will say, had enough, thank you. You know, I'm going to call it a day. Local government staff can retire at 55. Have we done that exercise across senior staff, senior advisors here, I said in Thurrock, so that they all decide we're not taking our pension today? Because we do need it. People...
That's everybody.
Here I
You discussed it there, weren't you?
and we know that's going to happen for some people. You know, whatever we have, we're not going to have 15 heads of waste anymore. We're not going to have 15 heads of waste. We're not going to have 15 chief executives. But we do need some senior experienced staff. You will lose a lot of senior experienced councillors. We have a motion going to district council next Tuesday. It is so naive. It is about keeping everything in Uttlesford. You know, Uttlesford won't exist. And you know, but this is saying we want to keep our identity. It's a really strange concept that there are those district councils who don't see there's no choice. You've got to be part of this new entity. It won't be called Uttlesford or Braintree or Colchester anymore. And some of them haven't quite got their heads around the fact that you're going to be... But my concern is about senior staff. There are people in this room I've been, you know, meeting for the last 15 years, 20 years, and, you know, we don't want to lose you or the equivalents at Southend and Thurrock and suddenly find ourselves with a lack of experienced. Because district councils stepping up to be unitaries, I don't think they realise what's going to hit them, to be honest.
But if I may start, you asked, is the work being done? Yes, the work is being done. Of course, while the rest of the council, it's a question of 15 to 3. In the worlds of social care, both adult and children, it's 3 to 3 or 3 to 5 or to 4. So it's a slightly different issue. But I can assure you, Councillor Barker, that everyone is very conscious of the holes that would be left if it were to be that our senior officers were to leave before the end of this process. I would equally hope, by the way, that as I look across the leadership teams in adult social care and children, that if one was to move to a different configuration, or even if one doesn't, if you have still 3, there will be good opportunities for some in the teams that support Nick and Helen in that space. They should be candidates for leadership in the new world, which I think will help. But yes, very clearly, it is a real risk that one loses both the officers we need, and of course, if there were to be elections in May 26, there could be very considerable changes in the councillor presence.
Could I just follow that up in terms of staff on the ground? Are we, I'm sure we do, have a picture of where the operational staff are distributed around the county, and are there any areas that might be slightly become a sort of desert? Because I would imagine that some staff might see it as an ideal opportunity to move a little closer to home. And I'd be interested in the views on that. Sorry, you were going to come back, Nick.
I mean, if I may, it's a question that goes to adults and children, so maybe after Nick I could bring Helen in. Yeah, I am always mindful that where in the end people sit will be down to the Unitary Council for the work. But Nick?
Thank you, John. So if I could just deal with both questions, if that's all right. So absolutely, it is a risk around senior staff. There is a government advisory board, I sit on it, and there's a risk group which Helen and I sit on together. And that's one of the key risks, and it's based on what's happened elsewhere. And what's happened elsewhere thus far is that people leave or retire. And that the only way to prevent that is to put some sort of preemptive action in place. People will make their own choices, of course, because the rules allow them to. Also, their jobs cease to exist. So the usual processes apply. So as John has said, we will be really clear that we want to make sure that people are here for the journey. It's really important. We don't want skills and brain drain going on. And the advice from the government is that the top 3 tiers of the new local authorities should have been recruited to 10 months before the start on the vesting day. So that does lead to an interesting paradox. So would I be, no, let's use Helen as a better example. Would Helen be recruited to one of the new local authorities and remain the DCS for those 10 months? We've asked the government to give us some guidance on how that would work, because the county DCS would remain the legally liable person until vesting day. So there are some things that need to be worked out there. We're working them out, I think, is the best answer I can give you. Staff will go where they will go, but TUPE will apply, and I think our frontline workforce should feel safe and secure. There will be as many jobs for social workers and occupational therapists as there currently are. We have vacancies. We've done really well at driving those vacancies down, but we have vacancies. We have a brilliant intake of new young students year after year after year, and they can choose.
Yeah.
I think is the answer, Hannah. I don't know if you want to add anything. We'll do everything we can to make sure they choose well.
You know, we both cover the whole of the county, so there will still need to be child protection social workers in every bit of the county before vesting day and after vesting day. So whatever the configurations of the new unitaries, probably the buildings of hubs that we work out of will still remain to be the hub buildings that the new unitaries work out of.
The other thing to think about is to move away from the frontline operational staff for a moment is the staff who do the technical roles, and our procurement staff, our commissioning staff, our policy staff. Really, really important in how we run the organisation. I think that's where, because they don't sit in locality teams, so they don't naturally transfer. Yeah. And I think that's where we need to do a bit of work to make sure that we don't lose that capability.
And this, if I may come in behind you, Nick, I mean, this is where we are a bit different, because a lot of the local government reorganisations, as recurred, like Greater Manchester, are about bringing together separate authorities into one place. In Essex, we are on a scale that's unprecedented. It has been done, but in Essex it's going to be the scale. You are actually creating a number of unitaries from out of a bigger force. And I would certainly be hoping to convene really good progressive conversations with those who are going to be the governance of the incoming unitaries, to get a sensible way forward on the things that really would be best for those unitaries to agree to jointly commission. However they do it, there are different vehicles that could be used. But the concept of joint commissioning, and the more specialist is the function, the more important that. If I was to ask Nick or Helen, they could give you a list of really specialist things where to break into 3, 4 or 5 will actually severely diminish the quality of service to residents, and that, of course, was a key criteria from government in their 5th February paper, that we must not allow that to happen.
Come back on that.
Quickly then, Carlo, and then I want to go to Wendy.
So just, I don't know if this is for John or Ellen or Nick. The district where I sit, I know what's been done, what they do to support staff from the HR point of view, and also to make sure that they're in the best place to progress into the new authorities. I don't hear very much what Essex is doing to support the staff here. I've been assured in the past that this has been done, but it's not really. There's not been a huge amount of information given. Can you confirm that everything possible has been doing to support all level of staffs?
So behind the scenes, we're talking to our staff all of the time. I've just met with Moira, and I met with her team. Helen and I were part of CLT, talking to all of our directors across the council. We don't want to say too much because we don't want to have egg on our face if we don't know what the configuration looks like yet. Yeah. We have to be careful about what we say, but behind the scenes we're doing everything we can to be supportive. We're recorded, so I'll be careful how I phrase this. I would look at, if I was working in a district or a borough council, I would look at the proportion of staff in new unitaries. They typically come from the upper tier, not the lower tier. So I think you need a different approach in the upper tier and the lower tier, because social workers, planners, occupational therapists, etc., they will have jobs in the new authorities. So I think it's going to be two very different experiences in terms of how this lands. But I've not seen the national data on that, but my instinct tells me that the tier authority jobs, because you could say the same about planners, because of the accountants, because of the nature of the job, they are more likely to be in the unitaries.
Yeah.
Just as a head count, because Helen and I represent such a large proportion of the County Council's workforce, put education on top of that.
It's about 4/5 of the County Council's workforce.
They will still be the jobs in the new local authorities. Those jobs
Because the speciality skill set needed.
and they don't exist as jobs currently in boroughs and districts.
And the statutory framework within which we both operate.
In fact, one of the really interesting phenomena that's occurred is that typically the majority of the workforce will come from the upper tier and the majority of the councillors will come from the boroughs and districts. So that will be an interesting cultural exchange.
That's worrying. The second bit is worrying, not the first bit.
Or from no tier.
Or from low tier, indeed.
Councillor Stamp.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the information, the presentation. I'm reassured because obviously I was honoured to be able to sit on the LGR and the DEVO working group and had meetings with you all at certain stages. So to me, this was the next level, the next stage of going forward, because I'm actually one of the councillors that is looking to go forward rather than keep looking back. I'm going to go to a bit of a minute detail, so forgive me. I'm going back because it's a residence query, Nick. I'm looking at page 20, and it was the enable, the discharge access pathway. Do you have the data to see how that people are being discharged? Because there was always an issue, or there was an issue, with people being discharged without care packages. Now, I know this council's done a heck of a lot of work in the past, but I was a little bit upset to get an email about somebody in one of my areas saying that the hospital sent the person home without any such care package, and they were having really great difficulties. And it was a stressful time. I won't give the personal details out because they could be identified within the local community. But do you have the data? Are we continuing to be able to improve? And do you think going to one ICB is going to help that tremendously going forward? So that's the first question. It's not that complicated. So, Chairman, and are we looking at introducing, or do you think the unitaries are going to look at introducing AI? AI is, I've been looking into this at great detail. Derby is the authority that did it about 6 or 7 years ago, using it to help because of financial issues. Do you feel that we're going to have the vision or the smarter ways of working to possibly go forward in that way? We maybe have some of it here, I don't know. I know we have talked about it in the past, but can you give the committee some idea of how we're using it, this authority, and if we'd be able to use that going on to whatever unitary? I know Thurrock have started to introduce Amy, I think theirs is called AIMEE or something. There's another one called Amy, AMY or whatever. But I'm just really interested in going forward of how we can actually start to ways of working smarter and to save money, so we are a success going forward. Thank you, Chairman.
If I may, Chairman, just to come in first. On the first piece, of course, it will always be the responsibility of the NHS staff to determine when somebody is ready for discharge. The piece that we've been particularly pleased about is that when a discharge is happening and a social care package is deemed to be necessary, that we have not left people in hospital while that package is arranged. That's the side of it. It is for the NHS issue if they discharge somebody, deem there is no package required. But I'll let Nick come in. On the AI, might I suggest, Councillor Stam, a very good question to ask of the Chief Executive at the Council meeting next Tuesday. Every council will use AI. The question for me always is the intelligence of the usage.
It's interesting. I find it fascinating.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. I mean, you and I have met before on this question, haven't we?
Yeah.
And I'd hope we've got a lot better, actually. But before I hand over to Moira on what we do and don't know, what I would say is if people are discharged on the wrong pathway and they do not have the package of care, that shouldn't happen. It's a safety issue, it's a failure issue. And if I know confidentiality in this room, but I would always encourage that those issues are escalated, and whether it's our direct responsibility or not, we will do something about it.
Thank you.
Thank you, but I'll just pass over to Mara on what we
Absolutely,
do and don't do.
we'd be expecting that to be raised as a safeguarding issue.
Absolutely.
So we've been doing a huge amount of work in the last 3 years on pathways out of hospital. Relationships have really built with colleagues. Actually, predominantly, it's not an ICB issue. It is about our working with health providers and care providers. So I don't envisage the impact of the ICB changes to be significant on that. The day-to-day conversations are between our operational teams, our care providers, companies like ECL, with community and health provider colleagues, actually, because those are exactly the kind of things that are done on a more local basis. So we've significantly simplified our pathways out. There was a lot of inter-arrangements that were put in, particularly during COVID. We've made that much more simple. We've got clearer pathways out. So as Nick said, we shouldn't be in a position where anyone is discharged without care. And if they were, that will be an issue that shouldn't happen, and it'd be an issue that we would pick up. It's quite difficult to monitor something that didn't happen, but we do have very good information on where people are going, how long they're staying in different elements of service, who is in hospital, who needs assessments, and the pathway out is to, as Nick said, to get people home. That's our primary aim, and then to work on their kind of longer term arrangements following on from that, where people do need bedded care or residential care, they will also move, but our thrust is to get people home as our primary aim.
Can I just come?
Certainly.
Thank you for that. And yes, we have spoken about it before when I first became elected member. But my understanding was that they were elderly, and it was the lady, but the gentleman was very confused and didn't realise, and they wanted the person discharged very quickly. And it wasn't until their sibling went there and said, well, what's actually happening, was that then it was identified. So I take on board you say you wouldn't have that data, but surely that should have been picked up where, because they messaged me and said they can't get hold of anybody to actually help them. So that's the point I'm raising, really. No, it's not a complaint, it's an observation. They were more upset because they couldn't get help for the elderly.
So of course, this is another committee in HOSC as well who've been looking at these sorts of issues.
Yeah, Jeff, we should have told you.
But our health system is under stress. We all know that. Our hospitals are under stress. We know that. Because of that, they tried to do things too quickly sometimes. We need to know whenever you've got an example, because if that's an indicator that the system is going wrong and at the end of it there's a person, we will act as quickly as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
Councillor Loxton, David?
Thank you. So you touched a bit on the kind of workforce transition and also on the system transition. I'm just wondering how complex it is in the south of the county in terms of the policy offer transition. Is that a big issue, or are the three fairly aligned? How much of a risk is there around that, and what's your assessment of that at the moment?
I'll ask after I've answered, or start to answer that, because we were also asked about AI, and I think I was going to say something on
Sorry,
AI.
yes.
That's okay. That's all right, Chair. We're well aligned in some areas. In other areas, we're not aligned, and we will have to become aligned, because the requirement is that we become aligned. But they will become political decisions. So often the areas where we're not aligned will be things like charging policy, or care technology offer. How long a council wishes somebody to wait for an assessment, and are they prepared to pay for more or less workforce to do that? So those areas of misalignment, and there are other areas where we are not aligned because we are very different. And I think I've said this before, but I think Thurrock's got 6 residential care homes. We've got 400. So we have a very different approach, a very different set of policies, a very different function. They manage their care homes by social workers going into them and being responsible as a social worker for a care home. I don't have enough social workers to actually do that. That would only leave about 50 or 60 social workers spare. So we have a quality team. So there are things like that, but the three of us are working closely together. I'm actually off to Cambridge for our regional meeting, and I'll be having a meeting with the director in Southend and the director in Thurrock later today. And Moira has started a piece of work of identifying where all the differences are, because I think the best job we can do is be really transparent and hand that over, or fix it in front. And we'll have to decide what the best approach is, case by case, I think.
Is that okay? Just to add to that, as John actually said, there are some areas where we do collaborate already. For example, we commission community equipment on behalf of Thurrock Council. So it's not that everything is completely separate, and we'll have to look at whether the new councils going forward would want to continue with those collaborative arrangements, but we're having some really constructive conversations in the first instance to understand where there are differences and whether, for example, where we've got contracts coming to an end in between 26 and 28, are there opportunities to align, or at least to understand what those differences are and what the implications are. So that's I think everyone's approaching that really constructively to see if there are opportunities to align or at least get the issues out so that we can present them well for the kind of choices Nick's saying to the new organisation.
Can I just follow up briefly? I'm just wondering, will there actually be an opportunity to do the pre-vesting day alignment or not? Because if you're saying some of this will require political decisions, I don't think the shadow authorities will have the authority. That will be outside their remit, won't it? It will depend on the legacy authorities to do it. I'm just slightly wondering how much scope there will be for the pre-vesting day alignment, or how much of it is just going to have to be talked about or planned up, but we'll have to wait.
It will depend on two things. It will depend on the provisions the government puts into the statutory change order.
Oh, so that could vary as far as what the strategic, or as far as the shadow authorities could do.
Because it could name a lead authority or a continuing authority in that.
Right.
I don't think, technically speaking, how they would name a continuing authority, but let's wait and see. And there's also something called a Section 24 notice, which limits what you can and can't change financially and contractually, but it does give you a governance route to make changes through the shadow authority.
Yeah, I agree. And I'd have thought if you separate, much of this is about consensual working, and the ministerial letter that we got in July was laid heavy stress on cross-border working between the new unitaries. Where there is unanimity between the outgoing councils and the incoming unitary councils on a path of action, you ought to be able to separate the coming into operational force from the effective date of change of governance. I've got this going on at the moment with the integrated care boards, because statutorily all the three integrated care boards in Essex continue to operate until the 31st of March. However, operationally it is very clear that the new Essex Integrated Care Board is taking responsibility. So where there is an agreement on all parties that some things can be done, I would have thought, effectively, Nick, the management can be put in place with the formal governance just following, couldn't it? In some areas.
In some areas, yes. So just a few, I suppose, observations. One, those authorities that have been through this process have said that things like pay equalisation have not been resolved for many years after. Yeah, so expect. They've also said that the assumptions in business cases generally don't survive first contact. That you start again. So be prepared to re-resource that. The other thing that's been pointed out to us, and this is others' experience, I mean, we don't know what will happen in Essex, but the other thing that's been pointed out to us is, and this was very much Cumbria and Northamptonshire, I think, is that to not overspend in certain scenarios on day one, you will have to take decisions before 2028. And so we need a process that allows us to do that.
And is that still to be defined through the final orders in Parliament, the secondary legislation? Right, okay.
It's still to be defined.
Thank you. Councillor Henry, Jeff.
Thank you, Chairman.
AI.
AI.
Oh, I do beg your pardon. It's been programmed. AI.
Yes, so we are exploring AI, and we've been piloting AI actually in terms of how it can support our social workers to capture things like assessment notes, review notes, the way in which you can kind of do summaries really, really quickly, and kind of what productivity benefits are. So we've been doing some pilots and tests on that, and subject to the findings of that, we would look to scale up. But yes, we do think there is potential for it, and certainly at things like the front door. And this is wider than adult social care, but surely one of the biggest opportunities of transforming local government is to look at all those different customer resident front doors and how AI could help transform that. Because we've probably got 25 front doors at the moment for adults, children's social care, each district council, the county council, highways, etc. There's got to be some simplification there going forward.
Jan, can I come back? If anybody is interested, the Derby model, they actually did a live presentation. Did you attend the
No, but I've seen the Derby.
It was amazing, absolutely amazing. I can't remember the name of that bot, but the gentleman, the chief exec, I think, did the presentation on it, and it could ask anything.
Yeah.
It's 24/7. And that to me is the key, 24/7, not just when somebody's at the other end of the phone.
Okay, now I'll go to Councillor Henry. Jeff?
Are you sure? I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Stamp's point. I think that's on the work programme for this committee that we're going to do.
I'm really sorry, I can't quite hear you.
Sorry, John. I think it's on the work programme for this committee that we're going to do hospital discharge and adult social care together as a work stream, as a continuity. But thank you, Chairman. I just thank the panel for the presentation. I think it was really, really helpful, really useful. I had a couple of comments. I think Councillor Loxton's already asked the question I wanted to ask. Moira mentioned her working with local district planners, and I can say certainly from my end of the world that's been transformational. It's made a massive difference to how we operate and how we help and advise with planning. So that's a really, really, really key thing. I think Nick has pretty much covered with that transition bit. And Councillor Loxton's question, my questions on safeguarding and Lado and the run-up and the crossover and the duplication, or where that would sit. And there were a few other aspects that I think we've covered as well. John, I think very early on mentioned social care performance platform, and that it was different to that of Southend and Thurrock, and I wanted to know maybe if there was a variation on the information that we collated versus the other two, and how useful that is, and what we've learned about the system, and how that will help us maybe advise and inform the strategy going forward, whether it's 3, 4, 4 or 5. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Henry.
So, I don't know, Moira, if there's anything you want to say. I was just going to make one point for Moira, which is, in all of the questions, we're exploring two things, which is how we transition safely and how we take up the advantages of unitarisation, new operating models, accountable care organisations, better use of AI, etc. That, I think, will become increasingly our dilemma as we get nearer to vesting new authorities. Do you go for these new operating models and take some risks in other areas as a result of that, or do you wait for the new local authorities to form, set out the opportunities as clearly as you can, and then leave the politicians to decide what balance of risk they want to go for?
I want to do that.
Okay.
So,
Do you want to say something on social care?
Social care platforms. Or do you want me to answer that, Nick?
on social, so my hearing, I couldn't
Social
get.
care platforms.
No,
So on the social care information platforms, obviously for children's and adults, we share Mosaic. Southend and Thurrock use a version of Liquid Logic, but not the same version of Liquid Logic. But for children's, the returns to government are pretty standard. So what we're collecting is very, very similar. It's just the process of collecting is quite different. But the kind of migration into new systems is very time consuming.
The issue will be for all of us how we remain within the rules of information governance, and the fines are very hefty if you don't.
Yeah.
So we will somehow have to be able to partition systems, because if by accident one local authority can access the data of a resident of another local authority, then we've broken all of the rules. Yeah. And that will have to be operable from midnight the day before.
Yeah.
So that has to happen. One of the concerns I've got is I'm not sure how well that has been understood yet. And with aggregating local authorities, we've got examples of disaggregating and aggregating. I think that brings a second set of challenges. Yeah. So again, we'll have to get it right, and we will get it right, but I suspect that will be one of our more costly challenges.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, I'm going to finish up with one last question, which actually is to you, John. I think we've had a good demonstration that at officer level, we're getting reassurances that, one, the issues are identified and that you are working with colleagues to identify the challenges, etc. John, on a political level, can I ask how many times you have so far met with your counterparts in Southend and Thurrock? There's a nice, in Hamilton, Music Hamilton, there's that in the room when it happened. Has it happened in a room yet? Because it seems to me there has to be political leadership or steering. So that's the first bit. And secondly, are you giving thought to what might happen should there be elections in a very short period of time in May, and a new group of politicians come in, as to how, as existing portfolio holders, etc., you might wish to act in those circumstances?
Okay, thank you. Thank you. That's no last question. Well, on the first piece, I meet with my counterparts, the chairs of the Health and Wellbeing Board in Southend and Thurrock, on a regular basis. The question would be, actually, not whether I meet them, but what the agenda is. And I will be quite honest with you, it has been very hard to get any traction across all the authorities as to the way forward, while the debate has been going on about how many. Which is why on the 24th of September, along with NHS colleagues and our Director of Public Health, we staged the seminar very much to focus on people. Regardless of where that debate goes, we have got to get this configuration right. I have a meeting with the incoming Chief Executive of the Integrated Care Board and relevant other officers next Monday, I think, where we will be discussing exactly that issue and how we best work with Southend and Thurrock so that we are jointly planning for that future. Okay, so yes, I meet with them. I know the two people well, although there have been constant changes in Southend and Thurrock with their own changes in political leadership. The move now is to move from the agenda we've been discussing to the new agenda. In terms of the risk of political change, I think we could all see that if there were to be elections next year across the three unitaries, then I don't actually know if Southend and Thurrock are due elections next year. Do you?
I think Thurrock are.
Yeah. I think Thurrock are thirds, aren't they? But there would be a chance in the current political climate, I make a factual statement, that you could have an administration come in with completely untested councillors responsible. And that is very clearly an enormous risk when you've heard this morning, and you will hear more after the break, as to the complexity of the work we're undertaking. And if you think it's challenging an adult, I find children particularly. So it is a real risk, and I hope that government are thinking considerably. While I'm a great believer in democracy, the risks of political leadership change over the next 2 years are huge. My personal reading is, Graham, if that was to happen, I just struggle. Now, fortunately, we have great officers. But if they were then given the wrong political direction, or a different set of political priorities became paramount after May 2026, I would be deeply worried.
Or indeed no direction. Right, can I thank you very much? I think that's a good point to end that. Thank you for the presentation, for the way in which you answered the questions. As I said, I clearly questions, we haven't solved everything, and neither of you solved everything. But I think my feeling is that members of the committee feel that you have identified the key issues, you are working on them. Some of them clearly, a lot of them actually, will be there and relevant, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 or 97. They will still be there. But I think we are reassured of the work that is going on. I'm just a little bit about the need also to get that political gathering as well as we move forward.
Another very good question, Chairman, for the council meeting next week.
Seems like you're making the question time up, John. No, thank you very much. I think that's been very helpful. I'm now going to have a 5-minute break whilst we change the seating arrangements, etc., before we do the children's services. Thank you, John. Thank you, colleagues. Right, welcome back, members, to the second part of our meeting today. We now, having looked at the situation regarding adult social care, we now move to children's social care, and I welcome back John John Spence as the cabinet member. Helen Lincoln is the Executive Director, and Helen has with her Anita Kemp as the Head of Strategy, Planning and Performance. Nick O'Shaughnessy is the Director of Local Delivery, and Nicola Park as the lead for Policy, Business Planning and Commercial. It looks as if it's very good that I've remembered all that, but fortunately I do have everybody's sign facing me, so I was able to read that. But welcome to all of you. John, I believe you're going to start off with just a little intro, and then we will have a similar presentation. So without more ado, I'll pass over to you, John.
Well, Chairman, I'll be even briefer than I was last time. So, if you recall, I pointed out that the adult social care transition to unities would be taking place in a highly complex environment with many cross-currents. In children's services, those cross-currents are more severe. We should be very clear that they manifest themselves in two very different ways. Firstly, the performance pressures that we face are unprecedented. The papers for next week's Cabinet will just be published today, and you will see from them the scale of financial challenge we're facing, and that is because of the demand, complexity and volumes with which we're coping, and markets which are universally recognised to be broken. Secondly, we are aware that there is legislation in its final stages through Parliament which will require fundamental reorganisation of some of our services and the expansion of the number of children with whom we have some responsibility or contact. Who knows what other legislative change will follow? We know that the government is grappling with SEND, and while that sits in the education portfolio, it wraps across into children's services as well. So the scale of performance challenge, the scale of legislative change are both of a volume and intensity that dwarf that in adult social care. If you ask me whether I am most worried, Chairman, I am very concerned for Helen and her team as they carry on with this work. Helen?
Thank you, John. So if we go to the slide pack, very similar to adults. I'm not going to go on the timeline because obviously it's the same timeline.
Understood.
And obviously this is the preparation phase, agnostic of configuration. So next slide, please. So just briefly, and I know Scrutiny know this because we are regular attenders at Scrutiny about why does children's social care exist. We support young children, young people and families to protect them by intervening decisively when they're at risk of harm, and provide care for those who need it so they grow up and thrive in safe, loving, stable alternative family homes. But our main majority is around child protection. Local authorities are responsible for assessing and arranging appropriate support and care for children and young people. And our goal is always, and we do very well at this, supporting children and young people to live safely within their family or within their family networks. And we have had years and years of telling Scrutiny about that. And when children do come into care, as you know, some of you are members of it, we become corporate parents. We have a corporate parenting panel which oversees the scrutiny of that work. The local authority education services is a broad set of services to ensure children and young people achieve the best outcomes and can live fulfilling lives post-school. Both education services for the local authority are both universal and specialist. And at the higher end, there is a need for children with special educational needs, but we do have a universal support to all schools. We are not talking about the school stuff today. So if you go into the next slide, this is what I call my bubble chart. These are the things that in children's services and education we as a local authority are responsible for education funding, distribution, school admissions, homeschool transport, school attendance, early years and childcare, school place planning, SEND, our inclusion strategy and disadvantage work, school standards and improvement, elective home education, the virtual school, which is about the school for children in care, trade, and we do have a number of traded services to schools, children missing education, and the education capital investment, which is linked to our people place planning. Then on the children's social care side, we have community-based commissioned early help services. People will know that as the HRCG Barnardo's contract, which provides our family hubs. We have targeted help for families with complex needs. We have child protection and safeguarding services, support for children with disabilities, support children in need, youth services, care leaver service. For children in care, we have kinship services, fostering services, residential services, adoption services, post-adoption support. We then have a youth justice service as well. And we obviously have a whole set of workforce services we provide. Some of those are jointly with adults, social care platform, and our training offer. It goes across adult, social care and children's. So that is the kind of gamut of the work that the local authority has around children and education that will go into any new unitary. Any new unitary will have to run all of those services. They're not optional, they're all statutory services. Next slide, please. So as John alluded in his introduction, the national policy change agenda for children's services is quite enormous, and this slide has got all of the things on it. Obviously, the green ones in top are things that people may are the real big legislation changes, and some of it has come in already, like the Online Safety Act 2023. There's already a new regulatory framework which is applying to the work we do and our kind of interface with schools. And then in the kind of purple blobs, they are the kind of like policy changes, policy direction, things that are being worked on, and in the kind of turquoisey blobs across the bottom, they are things that have a massive impact on the world in which we operate. Families exist within housing, within benefits, etc. All of those reforms have an impact on the work that we end up doing in children's social care. So if you go to the next slide, I just thought we haven't got time to go through every one of those blobs, but we have every one of those blobs. But I just thought it was important to give you some of the core changes. So Family First Partnership Programme is about a whole-scale reform of children's social care to deliver the national agenda of keeping children safe, helping families thrive. And we will be inspected by that to Ofsted. And Nikki is seconded into a role that's doing the thinking and development of that. And I suggest we bring that back at some point to a scrutiny panel. That policy is housed within the Child Wellbeing and Schools Bill, but that has a wide range of local authority education functions, enhanced responsibility for both the education side of my role and the children's social care side of my role. And we expect those legislation to land probably in January. And the things that come into statute then we will have to start to deliver, like multi-agency child protection teams. And there's a whole set of education reforms around it. There's the Best Start in Life strategy, which is about providing stretch targets about good level of development, the expansion of the family hubs. As you all know, we've had family hubs for years in Essex, and the parenting support and childcare capacity. So that's changing the 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old offer and ensuring that children's start school with a good level of development in a good space. And we're doing that in conjunction with Sarah Muckle, who's the Director of Public Health. But that strategy kind of covers both of us. But the good level of development targets are statutory targets placed on the local authority. As John mentioned, in the adult services, the NHS 10-year plan, the transformation of maternity, early years and healthcare for children and young people, neighbourhood health teams, and the transformation of the ICB. Obviously, we're hoping that the neighbourhood teams and the family hubs work will kind of coalesce. On the youth agenda, Many government departments are naming youth or wanting youth change agendas in their space. So there's promised a national youth strategy, there's a rollout of Young Futures programme, and this includes vulnerable young people, mental health, exploitation in the community, etc. We are due any day the school's white paper, which we are expecting it to contain significant change measures about the SEND system, but also about the school system and the curriculum system. And I take you back to my first slide where, you know, one of our parts of our role as a local authority is to support schools to function well. And last but not least, the National Child Poverty Strategy. We're expecting something in the system, and we're expecting something about how poverty is addressed and the drivers of poverty are alleviated over the course of hopefully before Christmas. So kind of the legislative space. As John said in his beginning part, the growing pressures and demands of our system are also a challenge. We have a broken social care market. The residential care market has been broken for a number of years. There have been a number of government reviews, papers. We as a council have written a number of letters to government about the significant growing cost in residential care, how that market has orientated, and John may want to say a bit more later. But we have significant challenges about how we grow foster care, how we deal with the change in demand of children coming into the care system. So you will know from previous scrutiny panels that we have talked about the fact that a number of young people that come into the care system with significant challenges, significant mental health issues, learning disabilities, autism, as well as difficult behaviour or remanded through the criminal courts, they all end up in the local authorities care system. Us responding to their needs is a big challenge. So there's been a growing complexity of needs. There's been a growth in poverty in Essex. We also have recruitment challenges, particularly about our residential care workforce and educational psychologists. We've had and continue to have a very successful social work recruitment and retention programme, which is seismically different to other places. I think we have about 6 agency staff at the moment. It's a very low level of agency staff we have for social work, but our residential care staff are a growing staff. We continue to have a responsibility to respond to separated migrant children. There is a statutory national level that we take. We're currently below that level, but that will continue to affect the number of children in care. And as previously we've talked about in this space, the growing issue of young people, mental health and emotional well-being. In recent years, we've seen a growing family dysfunction and instability, most recently into our care system, so children who have been removed from their parents in conjunction with the court. We've seen a recent rise in babies and small children under 5 coming into the care system. The SEND pressures are well known to this panel, as are the elective home education and children not in full-time provision of schools. We have ongoing court system delays. I'm talking about the family justice system primarily, where we are involved in removing children. We go to court in the family justice system. There are ongoing delays in that system, which have led to issues about throughput and ensuring children can exit care through permanency. So I'm talking about mainly adoption or maybe returning to alternative carers in the family. There's a lot of new burden, and therefore the new funding, does the new funding meet the new burden? And if you just kind of take that suite of legislative changes, I'm not sure the new burdens funding has been really well worked out for local authorities. And I think kind of across that, the pressures and expectations across our core system partners, schools, addressing poverty, deprivation, mental health, all of those issues, our partners in the system, the police, health system, are all also under pressure. So next slide, please. Current significant change programmes. So as adults colleagues said earlier this morning, we are in the process of re-procuring our case management system. That's going well, but that's a big change. We're working very hard with fostering. We've got fostering business case making its way through our system about recruiting and retaining foster carers. Fostering is by far the best option for children in care. We want children to have a family-based alternative if they can't live within their birth family or their kin network. We have a residential care strategy, which is trying to get our feet back into the residential care market in a small way to cope with emergency placements, but really about how we might work with providers, residential care providers in a different way. It's quite challenging given the broken state of the market. We are in the process of recommissioning the Child and Family Wellbeing Service and the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service. So the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service contract actually goes across the 3 authorities, Southend, Essex and Thurrock, as well as the 3 ICBs, but the Child and Family Wellbeing Service is Essex-centric. We have a SEND improvement plan, we have a massive inclusion strategy that we're working with all our schools on, and there are significant expansion of the early years capacity in line with the Best Start in Life approach. Next slide. So we have a really challenging delivery context, I think. We've got complexity presenting in the children and young people we're working with. We've got a decline in resilience of the families and communities to cope with the pressure, as well as our partners. We've got significant national policy. We've got significant challenges. If we didn't have national policy, we'd still have significant challenges because of the broken residential care market and the SEND system. And we also now have the requirement of LGR alongside our business as usual savings. And a kind of in red across the bottom, the statutory inspection of the local authority continues throughout. So we are due a SEND inspection some point in the next year. We are due a youth justice inspection any day, every Monday, I think they're going to phone. And prior to the LGR transition, we will be due a full social care inspection. And as Nick said earlier on, we are the responsible authority until midnight of the 31st of March 2028. So you asked us to pull together, next slide please, what the risks are. Well, the first one must be that of safeguarding. So any failure contributing to the failure of identifying and responding to safeguarding risks or serious harm is a real challenging space. We remain having to do that business as usual about safeguarding children, the core bit that we social care are here for, that remains 24 hours a day, every day, all the way up until the authority doesn't exist. And then it switches on to another authority. It's not something that we can dial down. It's not something that we can choose to duck out of. That's going to be there always. And that's a really challenging space. So with that as the focus, we then have the capacity issue, I think, about LGR and all of the other core changes. Workforce. We have, the perceived uncertainty of job insecurity impacting on retention and recruitment of staff. As you've already highlighted in your questioning, senior managers, leaders, there's potentially result in increase of use of agency workforce. In children's social care, we have worked for years and years and years about keeping the agency workforce low. We want people to know our system, we want people to know our children, and that's why we've worked really hard about keeping a permanent workforce. There's a significant level of service and transformation delivery. There's something about loss of economies of scale. We at the moment are, whilst we are organised into quadrants, we have one front door for children's social care, held in the north. We have one director of local delivery who really looks after children who are in care placement services. So there are some things that we'll lose whatever system is, we're going to have to divide. Always have to be however many front doors. Every local authority have to have their own front door. So there's a bit of loss of economies of scale. And then there's an issue for me about the same as in for adults, the placement market destabilisation. We already compete significantly with London for residential care beds. So trying to make sure that the new unitaries have got sufficient in-area capacity will be really important. We have lots of partnerships across children, families and young people, and the disruption of that we are very cognizant of. We have worked with over 550 plus schools, and we have a very effective engagement with those. We also have a really good engagement with police and our health teams and the voluntary sector. We need to make sure that we transfer those partnerships across. We already do quite a lot of work with Southend and Thurrock about, say, the commissioning of domestic abuse work. So I think that there are some things that harmonisation, we won't need to disaggregate, because hopefully there will be a continuing agreement about some of that work. I think the issue for me about data and systems, we've probably covered, and I obviously have said, we are due inspections, and the potential about downgrading due to disruption, loss of focus, is a real concern. And then I think the non-delivery of the intended benefits of LGR and devolution, need to be thought about. So next slide, the mitigations. So we have, I think, put in place an effective change management approach. We're doing lots of communication with staff, and we are doing, as we said earlier this morning, lots of work about saying to people, these jobs will continue in the unitaries, whatever the configuration of the unitaries. We need to make sure that our planning and business planning kind of enables the work we do now and the change work we do now to transfer across. And we're doing some work with Southend and Thurrock to think about all of these legislative changes they also have. So can we harmonise some of those or not? That might be tricky. We need to think about the appropriate resourcing of dual and aligned running. And I think that is going to be one of the challenges and costs, but we do need to do that. We do need to do a single migration to a new data system, and we will have to test that as we've already rehearsed the issues of that today. And then I think I really think that one of the things is in the service redesign, the new operating model, that we kind of make sure that we've retained some of the long legacy work that we've done. Both Southend and Thurrock run good services for children, but we need to make sure that whatever comes out of it, the conditions for success, as far as possible, are established across the authority or the new authorities. Next slide, please. So, there are opportunities. The housing and planning opportunity is big. A lot of our families, we deal with a lot of issues about housing, poverty, homelessness, temporary housing. And we've seen in the residential care space, the local authority where planning permission is given for residential care homes, the fact that Essex County Council in Basildon, Braintree, have been given the first nomination rights for those children homes, really, really important. And that's a kind of, hopefully that will grow as we get nearer vesting day, but post-vesting day. Obviously, there's some enhanced integration between social care, education, housing, benefits, leisure, etc. Well, the preventative opportunity is huge. And there is potentially the part about kind of like the mayoral determinants that may mean a very good offer for young people. What does it, we look at things in London whereby young people have got free bus passes from the Mayor of London. Is that potentially there's an opportunity for young people to have some kind of difference? And then I think definitely the expansion of cross Greater Essex commissioning opportunities, particularly thinking about the residential care space. So next slide, please. Transition. Yeah, I think it's just more. So the transition planning. So We need to bear in mind that we are safe and legally compliant. We need to have a continuing of our statutory duties, so no child is worse off. Remember, the legislation in 2004 says you only can make changes for children if they are about improvement for children. We need to make sure we've got child-centred and practice-led design. We need to make sure that we've got staff in a shadow arrangement so that we are protecting, retaining and keeping the skill. We need to have some coherence, and I think we need to make sure that those new authorities are inspection ready. We do know from places that have had LGR fairly quickly, probably within 3 or 4 months of them setting up, they have had an Ofsted focus visit on their social care front door. So we need to make sure that they're prepared for that by, because that'll probably be the September 2028. Next slide, please. We've got some work streams up and running about implementation and readiness, and this relates to the bubbles that we started at the beginning, HR, digital, youth justice, etc., etc. And then I won't go through the timeline because the next slide is a timeline that is similar to the adult space, but obviously one of our core things is about continued partnership working and optimal design so that children and families and young people continue to receive really good services from a local authority as they have done the last decade in Essex.
Thank you very much, Helen. Members, any comments or questions? Carlo?
Helen, thank you very much for your very real state of play where we found ourselves. And page 38 for me is the most, the clearest way, the challenge that you have on your hands, what the service has to, in order to deliver LGR as well as carry on the day-to-day job with 3 major inspections looming. It must be, when you say what keeps you awake at night, I think you've got plenty to keep you awake at night. I don't know how you get your night's sleep, really. My main area of concern is not nothing new. I'm probably one of the few members that are sat on the used to be called the corporate parenting board, is now the co-parenting panel, which, and I'm sure that not many members realise what the responsibility that brings with it. It is one of the forums that all the realities of running children services really are. Rightly so, today we're not talking about the school because that's scheduled for later on in the year, but to me the crux of the challenges are around children in care, which again it is one of the most expensive area that the county council has, and one that it has to do, as you just said, there's no options there until April 2028. You are statutorily bound to deliver those services, and now you do it. It's God only knows. Interesting what Nick said before. I made a note of that, whether an authority could be named as a lead authority, to deliver that. And I mean, to me, that is the only way this intricate service that we run can still be run without showing the cracks they could do if it was to be sprinted. Because that is, to me, I'm not, all the questions that were asked before about working with Southend and Thurrock, I think you were in the room. If there was anything that wasn't right, I'm sure you would have said that there are concerns, and members must still ask, but I will not be looking at that. I'm really looking to you to just give us your views on how that can be delivered still, whether it's 3, 4 or 5 authorities. Helen.
If I can come to Helen, Carla, I just want to pick up on the point about corporate parenting. And actually, I did just get a mention to the people from the office here. It came to my attention last week when I was chairing a co-parenting board that actually new members don't get any induction. And we need to change that. I could not be confident that even those who now serve in the Corporate Parenting Board, and I'm doing nobody any disservice, have all been fully made aware of their responsibilities. Just as I know there is much concern among all of Cabinet that the incoming unitaries understand their responsibilities in corporate parenting, and that will be a key thing to take forward. I'm just flagging to you, Carlo, I think there are things to be done now, okay, in here as well.
Thank you, John. I think that's a very, very wise thing to prepare and plan for that. And also,
Yeah, so we're quite clear about the legislative framework that we operate in, and that whilst there's a structural change order in place between 27 and 28, or it might be a bit earlier than that, 26, it doesn't override our statutory responsibility to make decisions around children and young people. So both Nick and I will still be there with our statutory responsibility. So until we hand over to those places in the future. For children in care, their new authority will be the authority in which they were living, or their what we call their birth family address. That will be their authority. So even if they're living, so they came into care from, say, Uttlesford, but they are living in with a foster carer in Basildon, they will become the responsibility of the authority where Uttlesford goes. So we have that we're quite clear about that. And when we have got the geographical boundaries of the new unitaries, we will start trying to make sure that we move children in care. They'll be the first teams that we make sure are set up and running, and try and align children to the right space. And that's a really important thing to do, because we want to give them as long as period of time to get used to, we wouldn't want to do things like change their social worker if at all possible.
absolutely.
We already kind of run that way and have done for years and years and years. So our geographical teams really do pick up where children came to be known to us from, not necessarily where their placement is. So I think that is kind of one of the key things. And we know that our staff will be worried about, their relationships. So we have, long-term staff who've worked long-term with children in care.
I was just going to add, and that's the same across the country, so that's not exclusive to Essex, that happens across England. And I just wanted to pick up a point about staff as well, because obviously it's not myself and Helen and Nicola and Anita that have that interface on a regular basis with our staff. It is our social workers. So I think it's really important how we support our social workers going forward, because what we don't want is people to think, I don't want to be part of this new unitary. Essex is a great place to work. Greater Essex will be a great place to work in the future. And they are the people that we need to hold on to, because they are the people that will have those enduring relationships with children in care, but also with families who we support across the spectrum as well.
But where we are much better placed than other functions, as we discussed earlier, all our social care workers, we will need them and more, in terms of quantum and that piece. Just on your lead authority piece, we already have an Essex lead authority model on the creation of, or it's coming into play, on the creation of the new Essex Integrated Care Board. ESNEFT, East Suffolk and North East Essex Foundation Trust, were very concerned about commissioning with both Suffolk and Essex. We readily said to the NHS we would allow Suffolk to be the lead authority.
Thank you, John. I think I have Councillor Loxton and then Councillor Henry. Councillor Loxton.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It's really very helpful and reassuring. We talked earlier when we were talking about adult services about what the scope will be for joint working on specialist services, and how the financial settlement will have a very big impact on the extent to which that's politically possible. I was just wondering how much variation there is, if there is, in the cost of service provision in child services across the county? Your colleague earlier talked about how residential care for older people, there's a variation across the county, but are there many variations in the cost of your service delivery within Essex?
Okay, so there's a variation between the number of children in care across the county per 10,000. So there's a different number in Tendring than Basildon. And Southend and Thurrock, but we still sit at about 37 per 10,000. Southend and Thurrock sit significantly higher than the 37 per 10,000 of their children in care. So there is a difference in how we deliver and how we hold risk in the community between our services.
But is the unit cost fairly uniform?
Could I just come? The difference with adult, in adult it's driven by the demographics a lot. I mean, Nick did talk about placing people up in the north, but the fact is we have far more older people in the North Essex, North East Essex than we do, say, in South West Essex, for instance. So that's it. What Helen's just referred to is the model to which we work, where we have been hugely successful, thanks to children's services, in enabling children to stay at home or with their families. Sorry, Helen.
That's fine, yeah. So, I think that's going to be quite a tricky space. In terms of our cost, we have our Essex fostering rate for our in-house foster carers. Southend and Thurrock have their fostering rate that are different from ours, but at the moment we're in a competitive space with them. So I have some carers that live in Southend and Thurrock, but foster only for Essex. In residential care space, I think the costs of our commissioning are pretty similar.
Right, thank you.
Councillor Henry. Jeff?
Thank you. I always slightly worry when John Spence says that he's more concerned about something, because then you kind of think, because he normally puts quite a positive spin on so many things. And your presentation was fantastic, but also slightly scary when you look at some of your bubble slides. 18 different statutory requirements from not only to the very last second of this council, but from the third second of any new council. And you just think, my gosh, how are they going to cope with that? How are they going to manage that? 25 new policy changes and a variety of other things, inspection regimes and a variety of things. And we know the variance across the county. I know the variance across my own division. I've got, on one side of my division, £1 million houses. On the other side of my division, I've got in Langdon Park, I think the Oxford Consultants for Social Inclusion ranked it as the #1 with the highest social inclusion need in the country. And there's 6 of them in the top 10, and they're all in Essex, 3 Tendring, 2 Canvey, and my own division. I think then about the history that I have with this council, how long I've been here and where we've come from, how hard everybody in this council has taken a generation to get us to outstanding, and one foot wrong, one eye off the ball, and it's lost. And it does genuinely worry me. I don't have any questions for me. I just wanted to say that I've done an incredible job. I've been here 8 years, and it's just been a meteoric rise. And not only that, a maintenance of a fantastic standard. Honestly, if we were seeing your agenda without LGR, I'd be thinking, oh my God, they've got their work cut out for them. But then to layer that on the top and to think about where that's going to go, how we're going to transition that into new authorities, I genuinely don't envy you your task, but thank you for everything you've done anyway. Thank you.
Chairman, may I thank Councillor Henry for his kind words in respect of the service. I'm a bit less certain about his likening me to a spin merchant. But I think you can see why I have the level of concern I do.
Yeah.
Councillor Vance, Marshall.
Thank you very much, Chair. One area that we haven't talked about today, if we could explore that a little bit more, is the cross-county relationships as well. Obviously, we've got children who travel backwards and forwards across counties. So what is being done about, the liaison and how we're going to address some of the cross-county work? I'd just like to get a feel for how big an issue that is for us as well, in terms of, is it lots of numbers, small numbers, whatever?
Okay, so so are you talking about our relationship with Southend and Thurrock?
Possibly talking about cross-county.
Right, okay,
So maybe Suffolk, some of our children may have to travel to Suffolk, etc., etc.
Okay,
So
yeah. So we have borders currently that we have to navigate. So obviously there is a whole thing about school admissions, but we'll park that for the school event of this. Most children who are, so obviously the county council only has responsibility for families and children in need that arise in the county. We may commission services that are not within our footprints, but we try not to do that. We want children to remain local, which is why we really pursue heavily local carers for local children in our fostering campaigns. The issue, I think, is more that actually a child may come into care in some place and be placed in a different part of the county for us. I don't think that is going to, that has been something that we have been entirely used to for the last 30, 40 years. I don't think that is going to be a really big difficulty. I think the real thing for me will be about making sure there is enough provision in each space. So a bit like Nick said, most of his, quite predominance of his care homes are in the north. We know quite a lot of our foster homes for Essex County Council are more likely in the north of the county.
Yeah, and obviously those children that are placed in the north of the county may actually live in Basildon, or they could live in Epping, different parts of the county. So we still have to ensure that they have that connection with their local community, with their family, in terms of contact with their family as well. But that is the bigger issue. It's not about the footprint outside of Essex, it's what happens in Essex, because obviously what happens outside happens across England anyway.
Yeah, and we're talking about a very limited number. So we have about 1,120 children in care or something like that. A very small number of those live out of county. For people who've been around a long time, we used to have a lot of children out of county. That has radically changed. Most children in care live within a foster home somewhere in or within 20 miles of the county border.
Clearly, there will be more of those cross-border issues, Marshall, in the unitary borough.
Depending on how many unitaries we have, there'll be much more of that to navigate.
yeah, it's just trying to get a handle on the fact that when unitaries do come about, some of those unitaries might find that they have got some young children who have to travel all the way into Suffolk or wherever it may be, and they're going to have to be responsible for it.
The bigger issue will not be travelling to Suffolk. The bigger issue will be travelling within historic Essex. There will be children whose parents are in one unitary and who are being fostered in another. Or in residential care.
And what you see as a big issue.
And they're all issues that will get sorted out, but they will be greater in scale than the number of issues we have with Suffolk or Middlesbrough or Hertfordshire.
Yeah, and at the moment, because we've got a big footprint, we've got a lot of schools, so children in care attend our local schools, and if there are issues, we deal with the local schools, or John Edgar, our head of virtual school, deals with the local schools' issues. I think that those sorts of things, when you get newer, you'll have new partnerships for schools, etc.
I mean, it's another day, Marshall, in the schools piece, but, if you look at our special schools and where children travel from to get to the range of special schools, there will be a lot of cross-boundary issues.
Yeah, I think we have to be really clear. The county council has existed for a long, long time, and we've planned things on a county footprint. So, quite a lot of our specialist services either sit somewhere in Chelmsford or orientate out of a Chelmsford office. So, those sorts of things we're going to have to disaggregate.
Sorry, Marshall. Yes, I do beg your pardon. I meant to say two questions. You also talked about working with shadow authorities when they come about.
Yes.
Can you just explore that? Explain that a little bit more.
So shadow authorities will be set up And obviously they are the people that then they turn the light bulb on when we turn our light bulb off. So I think it'd be really important when we know what those geographic boundaries are to at the moment we're organised in quadrants. So whatever those geographic boundaries are, we would need to restructure the quadrants into the shadow footprint of the new arrangements and make sure the cases are in the right place.
Thank you.
Conor, you wanted to come back?
Yeah, just one. Alan mentioned the HCRG. I think we renewed the contract and it's more or less expires around about the same time.
Yeah.
Is there any extension? Because obviously from one to the other, they don't want to be caught, without things in place. And just one before Nikki comes in. The one good thing about this is that both Thurrock and Southend, their children's services are good and outstanding, which that gives a lot of comfort given the problems that Thurrock had with Scrutiny, where key members of this authority went there and lived there for several months to look at the problems that they had. So that is a positive, isn't it? Because that's one thing is not often mentioned. We're not going to do business with someone who has no in order, but so the contract
is that when we set up the new unitaries, whether it's 3, 4 or 5, we will have no grading for inspection. So we start again, we lose our outstanding grade.
Yeah, absolutely, because that's right.
So, and that's why it's really important that whatever preparations we're doing, and there is a lot, that we are ready to go. The shadow format, the six months before, is really important because that's our opportunity to get everything lined up in place and almost have a practice run.
Yeah.
Not that we're putting children's lives as practice run, because obviously, this is about real people, but it gives us that opportunity to, to have the agility to shift things, move things around if we need to, and to keep those conversations going across however many unitaries we have as well.
I have, if I may, Chairman, I have heard, and I know you didn't mean this, Carla, but I have heard councillors, because Southend and Thurrock are smaller, there can be an inference that they're not as good. I just want to place on record, there are some, I know you weren't, Carla, there are some really great strengths in Thurrock particularly, actually, in terms of a lot of the things they do around the integration of health and care, but Southend as well. And we will have things we learn from them. So, there is a chance for a very positive collaboration.
Absolutely. Trying to say that we're all on the same kind of
HCRG
even killed thing because of the way they deliver their services. So,
you asked about HCRG.
Yeah.
So you are right, Carla. The contract is coming to an end. We are looking to bring a paper about a resolution of how we go forward with that. Probably shouldn't.
So it's work in progress.
Work in progress.
Okay. So we extended it more or less to unintentionally, because when it was extended, we didn't know that LGR was coming.
It's a commercial contract.
So what we talk about is contract liquidity, and the way we're working is to make sure there's no cliff edge. That the moment the new councils take over, they have a mass of contracts that they've got to renew immediately. So you're trying to create liquidity. So you don't want to lock the new authorities in to contracts for years and years after they've come into play. Equally, you want to give them a manageable workload.
Thank you.
There's a great deal of analysis being undertaken, which I assume will come to corporate scrutiny. We've certainly had a presentation about it.
Thank you.
Just pick up, do you have a feel for how much understanding there will be from inspection agencies? Where you've got two organisations, well, let's say Thurrock and Essex and Southend coming together, where you've both got excellent performance, but you do it in a slightly different way. If you get an inspection 6 months after they become unitaries, do you think there's going to be an anticipation that you no longer have two different ways? Or will there be an acceptance that, it will take time to bring them together as one, but whilst both are working well, that will be acceptable?
I think it depends, because Helen is obviously having many conversations with Ofsted and the Department for Education weekly, if not daily sometimes. And I think it's going to be about leadership, and it's going to be about the experience of children, young people and families, and what they're saying life is like for them, whether they're in care or whether they are receiving a service from us. So whatever we say, they are less interested in. It's about the evidence base. Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence taking them? And what's the impact and the outcomes? We would hope that we have the inspection before we go into the authorities, because then that would give us hopefully 2+ years to actually then be able to have a further full inspection. But you just don't know. You can't predict these things.
And you have to remember they are the regulator.
Yeah, no, I understand.
So, they are inspecting to a regulatory standard, and that regulatory standard is in the process of changing because of all of the legislative changes.
But it would be possible to deliver to the regulatory standard in a different way. No?
You have to have a coherent model of delivery in your authority, which is why we talk about our model of practice. In your authority, it has to be coherent.
So any difference, which might actually be working very well on the ground, is going to have to be addressed right away.
Variation is, and we spend a lot, because we're very large, so when Ofsted come, they kind of go, oh, you are the same size as Estonia.
Yes.
And we spend a lot of time trying to minimise the variation so that families receive a very similar service, very similar response, doesn't matter which team you come into. And that will be expected from day one.
It's going to be an added challenge then.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Finally, I don't think there are any more. It's another one, John, for you, similar to the one I finished up on the adults. It's at this time, Southend and Edinburgh have separate portfolio holders for children's services. You have a huge portfolio, adult services, children's services, and a few other things tacked on there. How are you going to handle that in terms of the relationship with our new, well, it won't be our new partners as such, but you know what I mean, we're going to be joining with new organisations. I'm concerned about the political input that there will be as we move forward on this journey.
Well, I'm grateful for your concern, actually, and I can assure you it's a concern shared by Mrs. Spence, actually, who does.
Well, it's serious, yes.
It's a very serious point, because I took this responsibility on, and I believe Helen and I have built a very strong, direct, and working relationship. As you move forward through this space, it clearly gets more complicated because the workload is only going to increase. So we keep it under review. The leader knows that I will always go to him if I think I can't cope. I do have 3 deputies, and until now they have very much been Councillor Barrett's Front and Children, Councillor Fleming on adult with particular focus on NHS, and Councillor Johnson is adult. There is flex within that we may need to think about how we organise ourselves so that we have a lead purely on transition. But I'd want to give this committee my commitment that if I do not feel able to deal both with the political and executive workloads, I will be in the leader's office. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that brings us, I think, nicely to an end. I think time-wise, Councillor Spence, it should just nicely fit in with your timetable as well. Can I thank you and all your officers that are here for that? It's been extremely good, both sessions. Thank you for what has made it, I think, very helpful was the very good presentations and getting them well in advance that we were able to read and digest, which meant we weren't asking a load of questions where the answers were already there. Clearly, this is something that we will be, it's ongoing, isn't it? So we will want to regularly monitor that, but not in a way that you spend more time here being monitored than actually outside getting the work done. So we really do want to be a critical friend in this, not a critical block, if I can put it that way. So thank you very much for all that you've done today. And thank you for coming along. And I think we see you again on another issue in the not too distant future. But thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We will just hold a moment and then we will. I think that's been two excellent presentations and
very good.
very, very helpful. Right, we will move on the agenda to agenda item 5, which is the work programme. And I'll ask Jasmine to introduce this, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, just to note the current work programme with a few caveats. So the children's safeguarding item is now being rescheduled for March instead of December. And from conversations in the last couple of items, there were a few areas that I think we might be interested in adding to the work programme. I'm not sure if you want to go through them now or take it offline, but I think Helen suggested the Family First Partnership Programme would be a good item for scrutiny.
I think we'll take it offline simply because we're going to have to be very disciplined as a committee as to what we can and can't do in the time we have, and also the impact it has on the resources that we've had in front of us today, who are clearly people not twiddling their thumbs waiting for something to come along. Councillor Henry.
Yeah, not about the work programme because I'm not on this committee, but just an action that we can take from John, perhaps Carlo and I as members of the Member Development Steering Group. If Jasmine writes to Sophie and suggests that we have a corporate parenting responsibility training session, that can be an action that we can list from today.
Yep,
Yes,
fine.
I've noted that.
Okay. Yes, so I think, as I say, we'll don't lose sight of that suggestion, but I think that will best be taken where we can have a discussion and look overall. I just want to guard against us merely adding things to a work programme and recognising that, one, our lifetime is time limited, and also, as I said, I don't want us to put unnecessary pressure on staff because they have got a lot to do, and we need to just make sure that we raise our focus on what's important. Okay, thank you. Anything else on the work programme then? Are we all right to accept that? Okay, thank you. The date of the next meeting is Thursday the 13th of November. Again, offline, I will have your thoughts on whether the pre-meet is at 9:30 or 10 o'clock. I think what we may do is to not use artificial intelligence, but good old doodle poll or something like that.
I don't even know what that is.
What, artificial intelligence?
A doodle. How's a doodle?
No, it was some way of just doing that, and then we'll be absolutely certain. I think basically at the time now, we probably do need more than a half an hour.
I think 9:30 is fine.
And 9:30, it was just, I think, the slight, but everybody who was here for 9:30, so that was good. So we will, but I will work with Jasmine on making sure all members are in the business situation on that. I have no urgent business at item 7, and I have no exempt business at item 8. And so in that case, I intend to close the meeting at 12:50.